everyone, and welcome to this codeLive in which I'm going to talk about the Apex SDK for Slack. So I'm going to start with my favorite slide, which is a forward-looking statement slide. This slide, we have to include it because we are Salesforce, and Salesforce is a publicly traded company, and it just means that you should make purchasing decisions based on the features that are generally available. The Apex SDK is beta at the moment, but I hope it gets to GA very soon. Great. So let me introduce myself in case that you don't know me. My name is Alba Rivas. I am a principal developer advocate at Salesforce, and here you have all my social networks if you want to reach out to me later. During the session, I'm going to be taking a look at the chat. I have the chat here. I'm taking a look at the same time at the YouTube chat and also at the Twitch chat, because we are streaming in both places at the same time. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask me. Okay, I want to say hello to Brittany, who's connected from Twitch, and she was already interacting with ourselves on Twitch. And I want to say hello to MSIT, who comes from Poland, who is connected from Poland. It's an European neighbor. So this is a codeLive session, and I promise that I'm going to codeLive actually, but I'm going to start by using some slides because I need to give you some context explaining why the Apex SDK was created and which advantages you will get by using the Apex SDK against other tools with which you can create custom Slack apps. Okay, already? So fantastic. So first of all, Slack apps. I'm sure you know what Slack apps are. So on top of that great functionality that Slack has natively, developers can extend Slack by creating Slack apps, custom Slack apps. There are Slack apps like for Google Drive, for GitHub, and for many other vendors, right? And what happens with the Slack apps that integrate with Salesforce? What happens if I want to create a custom Slack app that integrates with Salesforce, right? So before the Apex SDK was available, the really only possibility, there were some old methods that I'm not going to talk about in this codeLive. I'm going to talk just about one of the possibilities with which we could create Slack apps that integrate with Salesforce before the Apex SDK, and that it's also an option now. Okay, that's Slack Bolt. This is a framework that you can use to create applications in JavaScript, Python, and Java, right? But recently, our amazing Apex and Slack teams have been collaborating together to create an easier way for building Slack apps programmatically, which is an SDK that you can use in Apex. You are going to see how simple it is because you create all the metadata in Apex. You write all the code, almost all the code in Apex, and you don't have to learn like JavaScript, Python, and Java and integrate with Slack and Salesforce and build all the integrations yourself. I wanted to include this slide because this includes other tools and features that we have been working on. Some of them are already generally available, right? For instance, the Salesforce for Slack app, some features in Flow, etc., etc. And some of them are features that are on the roadmap or that are in pilot or beta and that are more declarative. Okay, this spans, so this picture represents all the solutions that we can use to integrate Salesforce and Slack from the no-code spectrum to the pro-code spectrum. But today we're going to focus on the Apex SDK, which is code and which is my specialty. So to understand the benefits of using the Apex SDK, first I want to tell you a little bit how applications built with the Bolt framework worked. Okay, so I told you that Bolt is a framework. It's represented by this icon here. So if you wanted to create an app on Slack that integrates with Salesforce, you had to create a middleware app, either in Python, JavaScript, or Java, to use that Bolt framework to interact with Slack APIs. Slack has basically two main APIs. One of the APIs is the Events API, which is a subscription-based API. You define in your app which events do you want your app to publish, so that a middleware app or an external system can listen to those events. Normally, you take action, you execute some business logic in your middleware app, and then you take action in Slack through another API, which is the web API. So with the Apex SDK, we're going to use the same basic APIs, but everything is going to be transparent for us. So if I wanted to create a Slack app, is half of the screen to the left, right? But if in addition I wanted to create a Slack app that integrates with Salesforce, I had to code and build all the authentication with Salesforce. If you wanted to perform actions in Salesforce on behalf of a user, you had to implement a user-to-user authorization flow, which is not like an easy task to do, right? We did an example of these kind of apps and a sample app called Ready to Fly, and in that app we use JS Force to implement all that authorization. You had to implement many more things. For instance, if you have that user-to-user authorization flow, where do you store your user mappings, right? Which Slack user belongs or is mapped to which Salesforce user? How do you implement all that in a secure and performant way, right? Because the information, the data flow is going like from Slack to the middleware app to Salesforce and then back. Well, in consequence, there were like there were a lot of steps that you had to perform to implement a Salesforce Slack app correctly. Okay, so what happens with the Apex SDK in summary is that all that middleware app disappears, and we do all that for you. Okay, so the Apex SDK team, they have created something called Foyer Proxy, and this Foyer Proxy is in charge of authentication, of user mapping, of or routing, right? Because your app may be installed in different Slack workspaces and maybe be working with different orgs, and all that from a secure perspective, in a secure way, and also with performance in mind. Okay, so what I understood from the product manager for this area, who is Tian Kruger, a great product manager. I recommend you to reach out to him if you have questions. So what I understood from him is that the requests that come from Foyer are prioritized against other requests. So your applications built with the Apex SDK are going to be, in general, more performant. Okay, so in order to use that Foyer proxy directly from Apex, they have created an SDK that we can use in Apex, a set of classes, methods, etc., that are going to allow me to interact with the Events API and with the Web API. Great. So I want to say hello to Umi Laila, who's joining from London. Thank you so much for joining. If you have questions today, don't hesitate to ask them. So I'm going to show you first a demo of an app. This is the app that we are going to use today to explain how the Apex SDK works, and we're going to extend the app. Okay, we're going to implement a new feature that is not working, is not part of the app yet. So this is an app that we created to showcase how to build custom Slack applications that integrate with Salesforce. And in first place, we implemented that application using Bolt, okay? Now, in the last weeks, months, I've been working on rewriting the application to use the Apex SDK. And this version that I'm going to demo today is the Apex SDK version. The app is work in progress, okay, because I still need to finalize some things such as writing tests for several of the classes. There is a good test framework in the Apex SDK that you're going to see later, but the code is already like available if you want to take a look, but don't consider it is production ready because it's still a work in progress, okay? So this app is an app that allows you to manage travel approval requests that are stored in Salesforce directly from Slack. Okay, this is a typical use case. I have some information somewhere else and I want to become more productive, reducing context switching by executing some actions directly in Slack, because that way I don't have to go back and forth to my other application, in this case, Salesforce, okay? So here we can see that there are 3 travel approval requests that were created by me. So on the home page, the app home, sorry, I can see those 3 travel approval requests and all the details, right? If they are approved, if they are still waiting for approval from my manager, who is Peter Cheatham, or if they are rejected. Then it may be the case that I'm a manager. I'm not, by the way, but I could be a manager. So there are 2 more travel approval requests for which that have been created by a fictitious user, John, who is supposed to be my subordinate. So I'm supposed to be the manager of John. So if I go here to travel request to review, I can see the travel request that John created and that I should take a look at. So for instance, let's say that I'm happy with this trip that John is going to do, and I'm going to approve that travel approval request. Okay, so if we go here to Salesforce, we should see that the travel approval request is now approved. Okay, you can see that every time that I'm interacting here with the app, I'm doing some actions also in Salesforce, and that's why that's how I'm integrating the 2 systems. Okay. Also, from this app, I can, well, really from everywhere, because this is a global shortcut, right? But I'm going to execute it from here. I can execute a global shortcut that allows me to create a travel approval request. So let's say that I want to go from Granada, which is the place where I live. I want to go to, not London, let's pick another city, Paris, for instance, to be a bit more original. I want to travel maybe after the holidays. I'm going to pick this date and also this date. And the cost is going to be $500. And I'm going to pick the approver. So here we can see another point in which we are bringing information from Salesforce. This approver here is the approver of my user record in Salesforce, and I'm populating this select by doing a SQL query and reading that information from Salesforce. And I could have several approvals because I could send this to the manager of my manager. Okay, so Here I'm going to write a comment. I would like to go to a conference in Paris, and I'm going to submit that travel approval request. Okay, it tells me in a modal, this is a surface, okay, that the travel request was created successfully. And if I take a look at the travel approval request here, we see that it was created successfully. Finally, I want to show you another kind of interaction that starts from Salesforce. That's something that you can implement as well in your apps. So let's say that I'm Peter Cheetham for a moment. Okay, I'm the manager of myself, and I'm going to approve this travel request because I'm fine with that trip. So now what should happen is that, well, all this works asynchronously, okay? So it may take some time to arrive, but here we have the message, okay? What happens is that we receive a message on the app tab saying that the travel request was approved and that I should pack my bags. Okay, so that's the app. I'm going to show you in a second how not how we build the application in Bolt, but I'm going to show you like the structure of the repo so that you understand like all the complexity of what we built here. And then we are going to dive into the Apex SDK, and we are going to extend our app by creating a slash command. MCORIA, I think it's MCORIA, maybe 01 says amazing. I'm happy that you like it. Okay, so this is the repo. So I told you, no, sorry, this one here. I told you that the app has been written with the two mechanisms, in Bolt and with the Apex SDK. Okay, using Bolt, better say it, and using the Apex SDK. So in the Bolt version, we had to create an app in Node. You can create it in Python and Java, but for us it was easier to create the app in Node.js because Salesforce developers have a grasp of Node.js thanks to the developer tooling that we use, right? And this is the folder in which we created all the Node.js code. For instance, this is the entry point for the application. Here we are importing Slack Bolt because it's the framework that we use to interact with Slack, with that events API and with that web API. There is a ton of configuration because we wanted to do things like in the most possible secure way. And finally, we start the app. Okay, this app needs to be running somewhere. I was running the app in Heroku, okay? And here we have like all the code for the listeners. For instance, let's take a look at the app home view. Okay, probably this one is not super interesting, but this one it is. Yeah, so this is the listener for the app home opened event. It is an event that is published by Slack when a user opens the app home, and this is the code. Well, it's like modularized, and I can go to this class here, but you can see that there is a ton of Node.js code that we had to write to implement that. We had to implement all the authorization mechanisms, as I told you at the beginning, storing the user mappings from Salesforce and Slack and so on, right? It was great. It was a nice experience. It's something that is doable. We did it, my colleague Mohi Sirivastava and myself, but it took us a while, okay? Also, it's harder to debug and maintain because you have the portion of the app that lives in Salesforce and you have the portion of the app that lives in maybe Heroku, or that you develop locally, right? And all the life cycle for the two apps is like much more complex. However, for the SDK version, things become much simpler. And for this, I'm gonna go to VS Code, and give me a second because my mobile phone freeze. Okay, so in VS Code, we have some new metadata, okay? Well, I'm going to show you first. Here I have a slide that summarizes a little bit what we have, the way in which we have created the Apex SDK, okay? So first of all, we remove that middleware app and everything that you write is Apex. Second, I don't know if you're aware of what is BlockKit, but the way in which you craft surfaces in Slack is by using a framework, a UI framework called BlockKit. You don't use HTML or anything similar, right? It's a framework that allows you to define interfaces with blocks. Indeed, here I have an example of some BlockKit builder that I have created in this amazing web page that Slack has to help you create your user interfaces first here, and then you can move that. You can post that directly to Slack, or you can move that to your application if you are writing an application with Bolt, right? That's BlockKit. But what we do with the Apex SDK is that instead of making you write that BlockKit code, you create the surfaces using YAML that allows you to consume data that is generated by an Apex class that we call data providers, and it's much easier to bind the elements that you want to draw in the screen with data that comes from Apex and from Salesforce at the end, right? And we transform that YAML combination with those data providers into the final BlockKit code that will be rendered in the Slack UI when you take action on that UI. And this is a point that I already mentioned before. They have implemented this in a very secure and performant way. So we have some new metadata types, okay? We have first metadata type that I want to talk about is Slack app. So the first step to create a Slack app is always to go here to api.slack.com, right? This is the app that I just demoed. And here is where you define the behavior of your application. So for instance, if your app needs to react to events that happen in Slack, such as the app home event that we saw before, then you need to define that here, okay? These are the events that my app is subscribed to. And you can do that like declaratively, going through each section and selecting what you want to activate, but there is a code version of that configuration, which is the app manifest. In the app manifest, you define all the possible options that you can define in these different sections, and this is useful to migrate apps or to copy apps from one user to a different user, right? So that would be the first step. I want to define the events that the Events API is going to publish. I want to define any shortcuts that my application may have. I need to define any slash commands that my application may have as well. And then in Apex, we create a new metadata type called Slack app, in which you bind those slash commands, global shortcuts, events to a dispatcher defined in Apex. So here, what I'm saying that when the global shortcut create travel request executes, I want to handle and dispatch that with an Apex class called create travel request shortcut dispatcher. Okay, I'm following the same naming convention that the Apex SDK team is following in one of their sample apps that I'm going to mention later on. What do we have here? For instance, our app home opened event. This is the one that we are going to explore in depth today. This is the event that fires when a user opens the home of my app, when I went to my app to see my travel approval request. And the action that's going to execute is the action that's defined in this event dispatcher, the event dispatcher app home opened. Okay? Then in the meta XML file, you will have to copy like your client secret, your client key, and your sign-in secret, so that your Slack app deployed in Salesforce is able to connect with your Slack workspace securely. And that's basically the baseline configuration, okay? So if you go to the documentation of the Apex SDK for Slack, which is really great documentation, one of the best pilot and beta documentation pieces I have seen. And there is a section called Getting Started, in which they explain to you how to set up your development environment, etc., etc., etc. I already did that, okay? It's just the regular way in which you set up your development environments when you are developing regular Salesforce apps, but you have to enable the beta and you have to do like a bit more steps, like with permissions. Then this is a sample app manifest that they tell you to use if you don't want to create, remember all this from scratch. You can start from that sample app manifest, right? And then I remember I told you that there is a sample app that contains end-to-end examples for many different use cases that you can implement with the Apex SDK for Slack. So it's this app, this sample app, okay? It's a sample app that the Apex SDK team has created. It's in a zip format, so you have to download it and take a look at the examples. We are going to use one of the examples later to extend our apps. And well, here you have more information about how the Apex SDK works with orgs and user. At the moment, one app cannot work like with different orgs in the same workspace, but I've been told that that's something on the roadmap that should arrive also soon. So here on the Build Slack Apps section is where you have all the documentation and where you can find the information about the app metadata, the new metadata that I just showed to you. This is another example app metadata in which they are using message shortcuts and slash commands as well. And then you can navigate to actions to start like taking a look at the different actions that you can subscribe to in from Slack, right? I mean, you subscribe from Apex to what happens in Slack and how to define those actions, okay? But I'm going to explain to you that in the code better. I want to check if there are messages or questions. Please, if you have questions, feel free to ask me. I don't have any messages or questions, so I don't know if this is too easy, too difficult, if you are finding it interesting. Any feedback, please let me know, because I can like adapt the codeLive to be like more personal and help you solve any outstanding questions that you have. Okay? Fantastic. So I told you that we are going to focus in this interaction, right? It's an interaction that starts from Slack. When I open the app home, Slack is going to fire that event, and the Apex SDK is going to execute this dispatcher here. So I'm going to open that class is a regular Apex class, but that has a special structure that we are going to discuss. So all the kind of actions that can happen in Slack are events, which are like these kind of events that start because a user opened an app home or because a user had an interaction with Slack, like starting from scratch, right? Also, actions are interactions that the user have with elements that your application has. For instance, a button. If your application has a button, such as those buttons that I had to approve and reject travel requests, those are called actions. Then we have shortcuts. We saw a global shortcut when we clicked the plus button and we created that create travel request, when we use that create travel request shortcut to make that modal pop up and create a travel request in Salesforce, right? That's a global shortcut. And also slash commands that you can write with I don't remember the name of this symbol in English, okay, right now, but you write a command in a public channel or in the application channel if you want, and then something happens, right? All of them are categorized as actions in the documentation. So this whole section called actions explains how to handle those 4 kinds of actions. We could have probably used a better name, because one type of actions are the actions that happen when you interact with buttons and interactive surfaces, such as a select, for instance, or a date picker, okay? But bear in mind that this whole section refers to that. So why I'm explaining all this? Because when you respond to an event or to an action or to a shortcut or to a slash command, you need to extend a different kind of class, okay? We have event dispatcher, action dispatcher, command dispatcher, slash command dispatcher, I think it is, and shortcut dispatcher, okay? So the actions, the important thing about actions is that they have 2 phases. Imagine that the user is performing an interaction in Slack, and then you have to compute some data, process some data, execute some business logic, and you leave the user stuck waiting for your response. That's not a good user experience, right? So that's why actions have 2 phases. There is the dispatch phase and then the handling phase. So in the dispatch phase, what's going to happen is that you are going to respond quickly to that event or that action, so that the user gets a response and we can continue executing the business logic on the second phase, the handling phase, which is going to happen asynchronously after the dispatch event. So the kind of responses that you can write here are a simple acknowledgement. Here we are just saying to Slack that we have received this event and that we are going to do something in response to that event. Here we can also send a modal to the user, update a modal if the user was already seeing a modal, or close the modal and kill it, right? So those are the action handlers that you can define on the dispatching phase. Then, what can you do on the handling phase? What it's ideal to do on the handling phase is to implement all your business logic, right? So for instance, in this case, what we wanted to do, remember, this is the dispatcher for that event that opens the app home. So what we want to do is to show to the user their travel approval request, right? Remember, if I am here on the home, this has fired the event, and this is the code that the dispatcher executes, is the one that computes this travel approval request, converts them to a view, and then sends this view to my app home. So, here we have the code, okay? So here what we are doing is we are just getting the user ID who opened the home page from the event parameters. Something to bear in mind is that this code executes in the user context. I mean, I'm getting the user ID because this is the Slack user ID, and I'm going to use it to respond back to Slack. But the execution of this Salesforce code is going to execute on the user context. Something that I forgot to say is that before I was able to do this whole demo, I authenticated with Slack. So the first step here was I installed the app and I authenticated with Salesforce, sorry, not with Slack, with my Salesforce user. That built a connection between my Slack user and my Salesforce user, and that's why now every action that I execute here is transformed in an action that is executed on the user context on Salesforce, okay? That's an important point that I forgot to share. So what we're going to do is to get the Slack user ID, and then, yes, I made the code a bit modular by creating a service class, okay? And the method that I'm using for this service class is the update homepage view, this one here, okay? So let's take a look at that method. So in this method, remember, we want to compute that view with the travel approval request and send that to Slack. To send something to Slack, to interact with that web API and take action on Slack, we need to get a client, right? And in most of the cases, you will get it. So you can get an app client, a user client, or a bot client. And in most of the cases, using a bot client should solve your problem or your business case, okay? So here I'm referencing the app that I created as a metadata. I'm getting a bot client for my team. Team is workspace, okay? This is the workspace ID. And then I'm, so remember I have a select in the home page in which I can pick between my travel approval request or the request to review. So the default option is my travel approval request. And what we do is to get a reference to a view. This is another new metadata type that we're going to take a look. And we build that view with a data provider that is going to feed the information of my travel approval request. I'm going to show you that in a second. And then finally, we use some classes to publish a view. This one is the one that specifically publishes the view to the app home of the user. Remember the Slack user ID who initiated that action. Okay, so how I'm building this view, right? How I'm building this app home view that contains my travel approval request. That is a new metadata type called view definitions. So here, this is the view that I'm using, and there is something very cool that you can use in your views, which are data providers. So data providers are Apex classes that return data so that you can use that in your views. You can iterate that data. For instance, there is an iterator here. So this is a data provider that's returning my travel approval request. Is this method here. a simple SQL query. And then what I can do is I'm saying that the result of calling this method in my data provider is going to be stored on the records parameter, and I can use that records parameter later to do an iteration. Okay, this is an iteration component, and we're going to iterate over all the records that are returned by my data provider to create the each individual travel request, the UI for each individual travel request. So something cool that you can use in your views are formulas. Okay, here I'm using a regular Salesforce formula to compute the kind of icon that we want to show in each individual travel request. If it's approved, we're going to show white check marks. If it's rejected, we are going to show an X. And if it's not approved nor rejected, we are going to show a gray question. And this is something that can help you like compute data in your views very quick and very easily. And yeah, and that's basically what I wanted to show of this view definition. Then remember that I told you that in views you can add elements with which you can interact, and that those interactions are called actions. Okay, so this is an example of that. This is the definition of the select element that I have on my view, and it allows me to pick between my request and the request to review, and the dispatcher is defined at this level. Okay, it's not defined in the Slack app itself. It's defined when you create that button, that select, that day picker, that element, that UI element with which the user may interact. Okay, let me take a look at the chat again. Okay. Okay, there are no questions. Okay, so this is one example of event dispatcher in which what we are doing after acknowledging that we have received that event, we are just running some code and we are like interacting with the web API asynchronously. There is another kind of handler that you can implement here, which is a modal handler, which is the one that allows you to respond with a modal, right? And we're going to do some live coding because it's already 7:45 for me, and I want to do that. And we're going to implement a slash command. We're going to implement a slash command dispatcher. And with that slash command dispatcher, we're going to return a modal. Okay? So to do that, first thing, the first place where we have to go to define like top level events and slash commands and so on is our app definition. We could define that on the app manifest, but I don't remember the syntax by memory. So what I'm going to do is to create a new slash command here. Okay. So the command is going to be called view travel request, because with this command I want to be able to check the travel request status for a specific travel request. Okay, here we need to indicate a request URL. If you go to the documentation, you are going to see that in this section here, I believe. No, in this section, yeah. Really, the URL that you need to use is this one here, replacing your app ID, but your actual app ID. So I'm going to copy this URL. I'm going to add it here. And the app ID is something that you can get from the URL. Okay, here I'm copying the app ID. The description is going to be allows to view travel request view. Oh my god. Travel requests status. Okay. And the hint is going to be the slash command is going to work by writing that and then the travel request name. Okay. So that's ready. Okay, so we have defined that entry point to our application. Now let's go to our Slack app. I'm going to close all the other editors. And we're going to define that shortcut. That command. So commands are defined here. I'm a copy paste master, so I'm going to copy an example from here. Okay, features, no, sorry, not here. We need to copy that from the app metadata section. That was the app manifest. Here it is. I'm going to copy this one. And we're going to change this to be view travel request status. The action is going to be view travel request. Command dispatcher, let's shorten it a little bit. And this views a travel, I don't know how to write, request status. And the description, I'm going to copy exactly the same so that we can go to the code. Okay, so this means that I need to create an Apex class with this name. Okay, so let's use our amazing Visual Studio extensions to create an Apex class with that name. And this is our Apex class. And the Apex class needs to extend a slash command dispatcher. Let me take a look at the documentation and see if we have an example. Here we have I told you at the beginning that these are the 4 kind of dispatchers that you can create. So if I go to slash command dispatcher, here we have a great example. And look, here we are using already a modal handler for handling that. Sorry, not action dispatcher, not this one. I'm looking for a no. Here I don't have the example that I need. So let me take a look at the next section, shortcuts and slash commands. Or the next section. Yeah, here I have what I was looking for. So here in this section, they tell you how to create the dispatchers, okay? And you have some examples of dispatchers that are already created. For instance, a dispatcher for a basic slash command that the only action that it does is to first, remember in the dispatch phase, acknowledge that the event was that the slash command was received, and second, in the handling phase, debug something, write something on the debug log. But this one is the one that we want to use because it's a slash command that returns a modal view. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it into my VS Code, and I'm going to fix the name of the class because it needs to match the name of the file, obviously, as always in Apex. Okay, so here we have a good example. So at this moment, this is using, well, first is saying in the dispatch phase that we are going to send a modal to the user. That's great. We want to show the status in a modal, the status for the travel approval request. And then we are defining the handler for the handling phase. In that handler, what you need to do is to implement the call method. The name of this method is different when you have a runnable handler, it's run, but in the case of a modal handler, it's call. And there is where you execute the logic that you need to compute to build that modal, and then you return the modal view, which is what you want to post into Slack for the user who executed the slash command. So here they are using a view. This is the way that in which you reference a view. And obviously, I don't have my view in that view in my code, but I have a view which is message modal, which is the one that I have been using to tell the user that the travel request was approved or the travel request was rejected, etc., right? And this is the one that I can reuse from my code. It's called message modal, and if I remember correctly, I have a class which is called message modal that is already doing all that work for me. So in this class, I have a method called construct view reference, and in this method, what I'm doing is to get a reference to the message modal, set a title, set a message, and return the view reference. So this is exactly what I need. Okay? If we take a look at the view again, I think I have it here open. These are the properties that the modal view is receiving. Something to highlight of the views, they can receive properties, so they can use data providers, but they can also define properties that then you set when you instantiate, when you get a reference to that view. And then those properties can be used along the generation of the components of that final UI that is going to be transformed to BlockKit and that is going to be sent to Slack. This at the end is BlockKit. So if you take a look at the types, this for instance is an element, a section of type markdown in which we are going to show that message. Okay, so at the end there is a mapping between what you can use in BlockKit and you can use here, but it allows you like to use all that data that comes from Apex in an easier way. In the Bolt version, for instance, we had to do a lot of concatenation of strings like to build our views, and it was not ideal. Okay, so I'm going to reuse this view reference, okay? And the way in which I'm going to do that is, well, first of all, here I'm missing something because I need to retrieve the travel request name from the slash command string. That's something that we will have to do. Then we will have to query the travel request object to get status, right? And finally, we will have to build the view and send it to Slack. Release to and return the modal, no? And return the modal. Let's write it this way. So the view we're going to use to create this view, that modal message modal class. And the method was construct view reference, and it needs a title and a message. Let me see. Okay, it needs a title and a message. So what we are going to pass here is going to be, the title is going to say, well, we are going to create two strings and then we can refine what it is. Okay, so we are going to have here a string title and a string message, and we are going to populate that now depending on the result of querying that status, right? Great. And then we use that view reference to build our model view, and we return that. That part is ready. Okay, what else? We need to retrieve the travel request name from the / command string. I wasn't able to find that in the documentation. I'm not sure if it's somewhere, but I wasn't able. But I told you that there is a great sample app here that you can navigate because it has many end-to-end examples that are going to solve questions such as the one that I had, right? Which was, how can I parse that command that arrives to me and get the travel request name? Okay. And it happened that they have like lots of examples, and one of the examples, it was command dispatcher view record, and there I found how to do it. Okay, this is / command dispatcher, and here they are doing something similar. They are showing a record, they are showing either an account or a contact or an opportunity in a model. But the important part that I wanted to take a look at is this one, and is the way in which they get the text of the command, they split it, and they retrieve, in our case, the travel request name is the parameter that comes with the command execution. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to copy the whole thing, and we're going to paste it here, and we're going to tweak it to fulfill our use case. Okay, so this is the command text, these are the segments. We want to throw an error, to show an error if the view doesn't have the argument that we expect, which is travel request name. We are going to fire the error to show the error only in the size is less than 1. Invalid parameters, that's perfectly fine. This is using another class, another method of my message model class, which allows you to show like several messages just in case there are several error messages. So I'm going to leave it that way. By the way, you have guessed that this model class is something that I copied from the sample repo too, and it was really useful. And then we are going to get our travel request name from those segments. Great. And what's the last thing that we need to do? To query our database. So we are going to retrieve our travel request. I'm going to do it this way to prevent DML errors, okay? Selecting the status _ C from travel request. Select, I don't know why it's not auto-completing, where name equals travel request name, limit, no, I'm not going to use limit, we're going to do it this way, and we're going to do that with security enforce to respect user permissions. Fantastic. Amazing. So if our travel requests list is empty, I think I can use is empty, right? Then we're going to return a message model view saying that error, and then we're going to say here travel request not found. Okay, and if our travel request list is not empty, then we are going to compute the title and the message. This I could probably do it better. Okay, this code is I mean, I should refactor this code after doing this, but I think it's like a good way of explaining this, saying first I do this, and then if it doesn't work, I post a model, then I do this, and if it doesn't work, I post this model, and then I do this, and if it doesn't work, I post this model. But probably I could do this at the end and just have a cleaner code. So title, and this is going to be travel request status, and then the message is going to be your travel request, and the name of the travel request, status is, and then the travel request status, for instance, and like this, right? And then we construct the view reference and we post this. We could use exactly the same down here for an easier so that you understand better what we are doing, and we reuse the code that we have in the other class. And this would be title, and this would be message. Great. So I'm going to deploy all this. I'm not using a scratcher because I'm using this for a demo that I want to last more than 1 month. So I'm going to deploy first my Slack app. This is a developer what I'm using. I could activate, well, I don't know if source tracking is available in developer orgs. I know it is for sandboxes, but I'm not sure for developer orgs. So Slack app deployed without errors. Then we're going to deploy this class. Let's see if we have errors. Probably yes, you know. This happens a lot to developers. And let's take a look. Okay, yeah, I wrongly wrote security enforced. So let's fix that. Enforce. And let's deploy again. I'm going to take a look at the chat. Meanwhile, Jordan Parra is telling me in Spanish that he's going to take a look at the recording for this. So thank you, Jordan, for your support. And yeah, our deployment worked successfully. So we're going to our app and we're going to try that. So this is a slash command. You can write it in any public channel. I think you can write it even in a private channel if you want. And the way to write slash commands in Slack is with I don't remember the name of this bar, the one that you use like this, okay, in English. And then a menu comes up and you can start writing like your global shortcut or your slash command. In our case, I created a slash command. By the way, shortcuts are preferred against slash commands. Okay, that's a recommendation from the Slack team. So I'm going to use view travel request status, and the name of the travel request. I'm going to use first a wrong travel request name to see if I get the error. travel request not found, perfect. And now I'm going to try to do the same, but with a travel approval request that we have in the system. For instance, this one, right? The one that we have in the right-hand side. And we can see that our travel request status is approved, which is this one here. So easy, right? If you have any questions, again, please ask on the chat. I'm happy to respond to any of your questions. So it was easy. The documentation, as I told you, is great. The sample app is also great. Remember, this is a beta feature, so it means that it will improve even more when it comes to GA, and it's also fun to get your hands on with this Apex SDK, and I had a good time really trying it out, and I'm sure that you have very innovative use cases in your mind for which you can use this Apex SDK. So I'm going to show you, this is a comparison to finish of the Bolt version of Ready to Fly against the Apex SDK version of Ready to Fly. So this is an estimation, and of course it depends on your knowledge, on your your team, etc. But approximately, I would say that creating the first app took us 4 complete weeks, and creating the app with the Apex SDK was like 25% of that time. Okay, just 1 week. So it was like a big gain in saving of time. Then the number of files that and the number of lines of code that both apps have are quite different. So look here, from 27,000 lines of code to 8,000 lines of code. And in addition, in the Bolt version, we didn't implement some features. I mean, it was not an app that was meant to be production ready, so we didn't implement support for multiple workspaces. We didn't implement packaging. Packaging works in the Apex SDK for Slack, and of course you cannot work with multiple orgs, while with the Apex SDK you will be able to do that. Okay, so these are the benefits summary of creating a Slack Salesforce app with the Apex SDK. I've already mentioned some of them, so I'm not going through the whole list, but I wanted to highlight, well, I forgot to talk about the test harness very quickly. There is a test harness you can use to write Apex test, okay? And I did that already for our app home event dispatcher. And this is how the tests look like, okay? So what you do is to emulate that your Salesforce app is interacting with your real Slack app. You emulate actions that the user is supposedly taking in your app, for instance, opening the app home, and then you can check how the UI looks like. For instance, you can get the components that are painted into the homepage. Okay, that's a quick explanation of how you use the test harness. And you know that tests are a must in Salesforce development. Well, and really in any kind of development, but in Salesforce especially, because we force you to write tests, right? And at the end, what happens with the Apex SDK is that using it translates into a faster time to market and a reduced total cost of ownership, the cost of creating and maintaining your app over time. To finalize, these are all the links. I will post the links into the video description as well. And it's just the documentation, some links for the Bolt version of the Ready to Fly app, because we did a couple of codeLive series, blog posts, etc., explaining this app, and the link to the work in progress code for the Apex version of the app. Some questions that you may have when taking the video is when to use Bolt for Salesforce for Slack app. And this is a question I asked to Tian, the product manager, and he told me that if your app is 50% Salesforce, then it has like the 50% of your app has Salesforce functionality or functionality that integrates with Salesforce, then you should go for the Apex SDK. But if it's less and your app interacts with other systems, maybe it's a good idea that you use both, because then it's going to be easier to integrate with those systems. Finally, I wanted to tell you that this is a free feature. You need to have a paid workspace, but it's not more expensive to use the Apex SDK to create app. So go ahead and start playing with it, because you are going to love it. And with that, I wanted to recommend to you the different ways in which you can connect with us. You can connect through our various developer channels. And I want to say thank you very much for joining. I hope that you enjoyed this stream, and I will be checking the comments of the YouTube video later on. Thank you, and bye-bye.